whole
Just give me 1 sec. I want to make sure the YouTube's on here as well. Amazing. Hi, everyone. Yeah. Can you hear us, Cristiana?
Yeah, I can hear all of you.
Oh, wow.
Perfect. Perfect. Well, I'll start by saying welcome, everyone, to Crew Classé at Home Volume 9, I think we're on now, which is pretty remarkable, featuring Cristiana Tiberio, which we're very excited about, Brie, Dema from Fogo, and Nick from Peter Pan here in Toronto. First and foremost, we just want to make sure that everyone is doing okay, that everyone's at home, feeling safe, hopefully isn't getting too bored after a couple months of isolation. So we hope you're safe and sound. We're excited to catch up with Cristiana, who's one of our favorite winemakers. That always visits the market a couple times a year, which we're very flattered about. Welcome, Cristiana. We'll get to you.
Thank you.
And Brie, if you want to I give you a little bit of an introduction, but if you want to kind of tell us what you do and where you are.
Sure. So currently I am the wine buyer and sommelier for the Fogo Island Inn. If you don't know where that is, it's a tiny little island off the coast of Newfoundland. It's positioned where the Labrador Sea meets the North Atlantic. So quite a remote spot.
But I think you're in Ontario right now, correct?
Currently I'm in Ontario. Yeah, waiting out the COVID storm.
Absolutely. And Nick, welcome.
Yeah, I work in Toronto in a restaurant called Peter Pan. Again, not open right now, but you know, I'm the sommelier and the general manager there, and have a lot of fun pouring wines for everyone.
Wonderful. And Cristiana, you're in obviously Abruzzo, joining us from home, standing in the vineyard. So if you want to briefly describe where you are and why it's important.
Yeah, so I'm in the middle of the vineyard, which is the historical vineyard. The main reason why we purchased this property, and but was not just the main reason why we purchased this property, was the most important single element able to change my life and the life of my entire family, because my father rediscovered this vineyard in 1999, and this vineyard was abandoned at the time, almost dead. People consider this vineyard dead, but the very important element of this vineyard is this vineyard represents the authentic historical Trebbiano Abruzzese variety, almost disappeared in the Abruzzo vineyard. So when my father was able to distinguish from the little clusters in this vineyard, the variety told me the story, and I asked him to purchase this dead vineyard. And so we started. Was the most important experience probably of my entire life, able to revolution and taught me the importance of several aspects. First, the importance of the old vines, the importance of the massal selection, what is a biotype. So taught me the real meaning of a biotype, and taught me that in Italy we have different Trebbiano varieties, and Trebbiano Abruzzese is one of the grapes, so not a different clone, but a different grape with distinctive DNA. So it was a very important discovery for us. And I spent at the time 5 years. I still spend the most part of my life in all my vineyards, especially in this vineyard. But for the first 5 years, the experience was very deep and intense, because I worked for 5 seasons, not five seasons, but 5 years with a vineyard not able to produce any fruit. So was a deep challenge. But I was kind of not just a passion, but obsessed about the idea to save this grape variety. Because for me, all the vines with their historical heritage represent our identity, our history, our tradition, and are able to bring us to the future, saving our identity and our sense of the place and distinguishable element of the terroir, grape variety, and distinguishable element of the wine, of course. So
And
the
then-
challenge.
Go ahead, sorry.
So the challenge was to try to revive this vineyard, and was tough, a lot of pressure, quite stressful. But in 5 years, the first vines were able to revive and to produce the first fruit. So from 1999, when I started, I had my first harvest and Trebbiano d'Abruzzo vintage from 100% Trebbiano Abruzzese in 2004, finally.
And then is that when you performed the massal selection and started replanting the vines? And if you don't mind, could you explain what massal selection is, if you could?
Yeah, the massal selection, we work just with massal selections in our vineyards. Our vines produced by propagating the oldest vines in our property. So our vines we graft on a rootstock, and we produce a new young plant and vine. Are important because in the massal selections there are the historical heritage of the old vines, very well, perfectly adapted to the specific spot where I took this vine. So there is a more specificity and more elements of the terroir in a massal selection.
Yeah, so you're taking obviously the rootstock or the vines from your actual vineyard instead of going to a greenhouse, purchasing vines, planting them, etc.
Exactly. We just buy the rootstock and we graft on the rootstock the massal selection. In this vineyard, not all the vines have a rootstock because some vines are ungrafted because of specific elements of the subsoil. But this is an heritage and a very lucky condition we received from the past. But we don't plant young vine ungrafted. We use a rootstock.
And how have you seen the wines evolve since that first vintage in 2004? Like change as you started making them or using those older vines?
Yeah, they changed because, of course, no one have been pruned this vineyard for more than 15 years. This vineyard didn't produce any fruit for more than 15 years. So over the vintages, the sprouts, the shoots are more regular. For example, even the yield of the vines is more constant. The first vintage, was up and down, so the vineyard still needed to rebalance a little bit. But over the years, this vineyard was able in a very short in a couple of vintages and years was able to rebalance and to give a constant result. Is the great importance of the old vines, because the oldest vines in this vineyard, like this one, are 90 years old. So the balance it's quite fragile but you know, it's very constant in the vintages.
And could you explain just the trellis system that you're standing under, in, beside, and if you're going to be using that for your new plantings moving forward as well, or is it just this particular vineyard?
We have two pergola abruzzese. This training system is called the pergola abruzzese. We use a pergola abruzzese for Trebbiano, Abruzzese, and for Montepulciano. For the rest of the vineyard, we planted different training system, as a guyot or spur pruning, because for us is very important to choose the training system according, of course, to the grape variety, but even to specific condition of the plots. So any single plot has a different soils element and subsoil profile, and so the training system depends on the soil. I'm not a dogmatic person, so I always try to keep my mind sharp and to take the most suitable decision for my grape vines.
Amazing. And did you want to stand out there for the entire talk? Did you want to go in and sit down and have a glass with us, or what did you?
Yeah, absolutely, because I have my bottle ready for our chat.
Perfect. And while you walk and move, Brie, could you tell us when you first met Cristiana and when you might have tried the wines yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the first time that we met Cristiana was Collisione in 2015. Does that sound familiar?
Yeah.
Certainly that's the first time I tried your wines. Then following that at Vinitaly Academy, the Trebbiano and the Montepulciano and the Pecorino, I believe, were all used as examples for being a benchmark of their varietal and also their terroir. So
amazing. And then did you decide, are you the one who decided to bring them into Fogo? Were they already part of the program prior?
No, I brought them in. I find that everything that Cristiana talks about in preserving native grapes and holding on to culture, holding on to history is something that we strive for in our wine partners at the end. So her wines fit in really well. Yeah.
What's the difficulty of, are you importing them into Newfoundland, or is there an importer there? What's the difficulty of getting things started?
There are definitely challenges associated with a wine program on a tiny island. There's a provincial liquor board, the NLC, so I just use a private order system, much like you would through the LCBO. The logistics are definitely time. The wines do take a little bit longer to get there, sometimes 6 months, and then storage. So warehousing as well can be an issue.
And Nick, you are obviously a huge fan of Cristiana. Anyone who knows Nick or has been to Peter Pan knows of Nick's love for Tiberio. You've hosted many luncheons and dinners and events and stuff with Cristiana when she's in town. So could you maybe talk about your history of Cristiana as well?
Yeah, I remember, 2 years ago, Cristiana came in and did a wine training for my team. And it was really strange because I hadn't really tasted the wines before. And I felt like I was on the journey with my team for taste. And like, I was so impressed by these wines. And it's been such a fun journey for my knowledge to play catch up to my palate, because like I loved all these wines, but I didn't really know about Abruzzo. I didn't know about Trebbiano, Abruzzese. I didn't know about how special all these wines were, and then it's taken years to sort of catch up and understand, like hearing from experts how special these wines are. You don't often have that experience. Mostly it's the other way around. You hear experts tell you how great a wine is, and then you finally get to taste it. But for me, it was such a nice journey to have this like visceral sensory experience, and then to be sort of proven right by the rest of the world. So it's been a great journey, and I love the wines. I always have. And guess welcome too.
This question is for all of you, but maybe we'll start with Cristiana. How have you seen the Abruzzo region evolve in the past, 20 years or so since you've started? working there?
It's for me.
Yeah, for you. Yeah, we'll start with you.
Okay. I think Abruzzo is growing, not in terms of quantity of producers, but mainly in terms of talented and sensitive producers. A little bit spread out in the different areas of the region, because we always talk about Abruzzo, but Abruzzo has the different areas with different climates and soils and different results in wines, and even with the different traditional grape varieties. So when I started in 19 and my first vintage in 2004, the most part of the Abruzzo producers were located along the coast. Now the style it's a little bit changing, so a lot of growers are moving to this part of the region, so in the Abruzzo inland, and a lot of small artisanal producers with great sensibility for the identity and the history and traditional aspect of our grape variety and wines. So my point of view is absolutely positive, and I'm proud of what Abruzzo is doing.
Well, anyone who knows you do a lot of footwork. You travel fairly extensively speaking about Abruzzo and its importance of native grape varietals, which I think we're all very thankful for. Nick and Brie, do you see more representation of Abruzzo wines in your markets? I guess Brie, you could start there.
I can't really speak to the Newfoundland market. There's not a wide berth of native grapes available here, but certainly in Ontario, I would say there's a great divide, and maybe Abruzzo is a region where I look for producer first. If I don't know the producer, I find the quality can really vary. So I don't know if that's...
Nick, do you want to speak to that a bit?
Yeah, like learning about like the biotype of Trebbiano Abruzzese, and like I definitely have struggled to sort of, I mean, I understood that it's obviously the more sort of the best example of Trebbiano, and it is the most prized sort of wine, but sort of finding it on the bottle, or having tasting Trebbianos from Abruzzo and having to ask producers, well, what Trebbiano is it? And that's always been a challenge. And I think it's always great when you find producers who use that grape. But it is a minefield, and like Brie was saying, you do have to know producers before you can. It's less about sort of the terroir, but more about like what is the producer trying to do, because there is a lot of like bulk wine made in Abruzzo from Trebbiano and from Montepulciano, and it can be a real like minefield to see what you're tasting.
Absolutely. And Cristiana, is it high? Yeah. And is it true that you had international varietals planted in the vineyard as well at one point, but you decided to stick with indigenous?
At some point, my father, because actually the estate was founded by my father, and me and my brother took over in 2004 in full charge. He wanted to plant some international variety to taste the terroir. But as soon as me and my brother took over, we displanted. So the experience, we didn't agree with our father, but you know, I'm very grateful with him, because he was and he is such a brave man. You know, it's not easy for a man, especially in Italy, to, you know, to retire and give 100% of the control and the full decision to young kids. But he did. And when I asked my father to purchase an old vineyard, that vineyard abandoned, covered by weeds, was you know, crazy challenge. But he followed me, and he supported me in this you know, adventure, in this life you know, life mood. And so at least me and my brother decided, okay, if he wants to taste something, let he taste, even because at the time I spend time, work, money because I studied the vines with no fruit, with no sustainability for the estate at that time. Was just to invest my time, work, but making DNA taste cost a lot of money, and he supported us. We are not a rich family, so he supported us with extra effort, and at least to let him taste something he wanted to taste was very, you know, just polite. And you know,
well, we've spoken about, you know, your focus on indigenous varietals, but maybe we should actually say what those are in case people who are watching don't know. So you want to talk about the wines that you make? You make currently?
Yes, we work with indigenous varieties, native grapes. The native grapes are the grape variety that were born in our area, not just in our region, but in this precise area. So they were born here, they found here the most suitable adaptation. And thanks to this aspect, the wines coming from these native grapes have more specificity, are very terroir driven, with a very precise identity coming from the sense of the place, but even from the genetic heritage of these native grapes. So native means traditional grape variety of this specific part of Abruzzo. And this is a very important element for me, because in Abruzzo we have other varieties considered native, so admitted to plant, like Passerina and Cococciola, but I don't work with these varieties because they are not traditional of my precise area. So it's not about what is considered native for all the region, but what is native of this precise area in terms of climate and in terms of soil. The native grapes usually are more well adapted, so they work very well in terms of traditional flavors, able to express the traditional flavors of the variety, but are even more rustic because of the adaptation. They know the specific disease, climate challenges of this area, so are suitable themselves to resist, to afford, to face in a more spontaneous way traditional aspect of this area. So we can be organic even in a deeper way.
Okay, so you're producing multiple Ciano, correct? Trebbiano,
sorry, yes,
and Pecorino. Yeah, it's okay.
we work with Trebbiano Abruzzese grape variety, Pecorino, and Montepulciano d'Abruzzo grape. Montepulciano d'Abruzzo grape, we use Montepulciano d'Abruzzo to make two different wines: the classic Montepulciano d'Abruzzo red wine and the Cerasuolo d'Abruzzo, 100% Montepulciano grape, but is a kind of rosé wine.
Yeah, with the Cerasuolo is incredibly popular in our market, as you probably know. You ship us heaps of it.
Yeah.
But it's obviously a far cry from massal rosé, as you can say. Can you tell us a little bit of history about Cerasuolo in particular and how it came about?
Yeah, it's a super fascinating history because the Cerasuolo is a traditional wine coming from a mountain area of Abruzzo. Was born in mountain area because the Montepulciano grape variety is a traditional grape born in mountain area of Abruzzo in an area called Valle Peligna. And in that area, before the global warming, before the climate change, the Montepulciano grape couldn't fully ripen. So the intention of the growers was to make a red wine. But in fact, because the fruit was not fully ripened, the result was to have a Cerasuolo d'Abruzzo, not a red wine, but even not a classic rosé wine, in the middle. So was born the appellation Cerasuolo d'Abruzzo to explain the meaning of the Montepulciano grape and Montepulciano wine coming from mountain area. And there is an interesting aspect because until I think 2012, the appellation was Montepulciano d'Abruzzo Cerasuolo. Just in 2013, Cerasuolo d'Abruzzo earns a proper, a distinguishable appellation. Before that time was a subcategory of the Montepulciano, just to let people understand why the Cerasuolo d'Abruzzo is so unique and so close to a chillable light red wine.
And that's just Montepulciano going straight to press, correct? There's no skin contact.
100%, yeah, 100%. In my case, there is no skin contact. It's a single vineyard Montepulciano. I used to make Cerasuolo with south exposure. In this soil, I have a little bit more clay. So there is a different balance in the ripeness of this Montepulciano fruit, where I'm able to collect full flavors, but to keep the texture a little bit behind, so more crunchiness. The acidity is higher than the ripeness of the flavors is supposed to have. So the result is a free run juice, but the color is a cherry color. That's why the name of the wine, because Cerasuolo means cherry-like in Italian. But it's not just cherry. It's not just about cherries. It's a very complex wine with beautiful texture. Yes, but just free run, because maceration in my case will provide too much tannins, and the Cerasuolo has bright, beautiful tannins, but light, vibrant, not too intense like a light red. And so free run is the best option for me.
And Brie, for something like the Cerasuolo and the restaurant side and serving it, obviously, and pairing it with food, how do you find that wine kind of adapts to the food that you guys serve at Fogo?
Oh, it's almost a constant fall and winter rosé on any wine program I've run, for sure. Montepulciano, both in the red and the Cerasuolo form, surprisingly excellent with moose and caribou, which is game that we serve very often. Yeah.
Amazing. And Nick, you obviously are doing more French style bistro at Peter Pan. Can you talk a little bit about Cerasuolo or even the other wines you'd like in terms of pairing those with food?
Yeah, definitely. I think, you know, I have a lot of guests who have a really limited vision of what like chilled sort of rosé style wines are. And Cerasuolo is such a great way to sort of break them out of that sort of mindset that there are different ways of drinking chilled sort of red wines, that it isn't just, you know, rosé, or it isn't, you know, there is Cerasuolos and there's Lambruscos and there's different ways to experience wine like that. So I'm always pleasantly surprised, and I like what Brie was saying about like having that winter sort of rosé style, like having something with a little bit more like body and a little bit more sort of flavor, and it's perfect. Like, I mean, you always remarkably surprised by how much sort of rosé you sell in the winter. Everyone thinks, oh, it's not worth it, but bottles of it go out the door. And I think that these style, like Cerasuolo, is a really great style to complement sort of more hardier, sort of colder weather.
Well, we sell it all year round, or we try to when we can get enough stock of it. But it's one of those wines that I think it is a good adaptation from rosé into, like you said, into the fall, into the winter time. Because I find a lot of French style rosés, you know, as soon as like September, long weekend is over, no one's really into them anymore. They think of it as a hot weather wine, but Chirasulo kind of bucks that trend, I think. Cristiana, you also talked about single vineyard wines and a little bit of Chirasulo, but you also do obviously Fonte Canale for your Trebbiano and Colavota. Could you talk a little bit about those two wines as well?
Yes, so are both single vineyard. In the case of Fonte Canale, it's more correct to say single vines, because not all the vines of this plot are involved in making and in becoming Fonte Canale. Fonte Canale is 100% Trebbiano Abruzzese, as all the rest of my Trebbiano d'Abruzzo wine. But in the case of the Fonte Canale, the biotype is different. We call Fonte Canale biotype. So it's a different behavior of the same DNA. So same grape with same genetic aspect. But what is a biotype? A biotype is a different behavior of this of a specific genetic element, where these different characteristics have been sculptured by the soil and the climate and specific condition of the soil profile over the years. So the Fonte Canale biotype has a different shape of the cluster, different leaves, different taste, different harvest time, different indigenous yeast patrimony. The wine is different, of course, not because of the winemaking process is different, but because the biotype is different. Are the oldest vines in my vineyard of Trebbiano Abruzzese from 80 to 90 years old. All these vines are ungrafted, so no rootstock. The soil is calcareous for all the plot, but in the area where the Fonte Canale vines are located, the subsoil is a sandy subsoil. And so the sand was the main element why these vines were able to survive ungrafted. With water in the deep subsoil. So we don't feed the soil, we don't use irrigation, and these vines struggle very much to extract minerals from the subsoil and to extract water from the subsoil. So the meaning why the Fonte Canale has this, I call liquid minerality, this flintiness, is because of the elements of this subsoil and the unique balance of these vines in this ungrafted condition. So all the Fonte Canale vines revived later than my classic Trebbiano. The first vintage I had, the first Fonte Canale fruit was in 2007, so 3 years later. And since the beginning, I was not able to blend the Fonte Canale biotype and fruit in my classic Trebbiano because the harvest time is completely different. And so it was an important experience for me. I learned a lot about the diversity and the identity of the biotypes, how to manage in a different way the biotype, respecting different needs and different results in wines. I learned why some minerals in the soils bring out such qualities in the wines and some other don't. So it was a very incredible, captivating experience for me and occasion of learning. The Colavota is a Montepulciano single vineyard, and it's was another important experience for me because at that time I was studying and working to make a kind of Riserva Montepulciano, using the oldest Montepulciano vine I have in my property, because logically old vines give interesting results,
Yeah.
but wines is not about logic. So, and the Fontecanale vineyard is a vineyard I planted in 2000, grafting the oldest Montepulciano vines. So I started by a precise biotype. Over the years, because of this unique condition of this vineyard, is the only vineyard I have with east exposure and has a sandy subsoil. This vineyard changed the biotype. So the biotype mutated because found its own adaptation to different conditions of this environment. So this fruit changed even the aspect. The resulting wine is incredibly different from all the rest of my Montepulciano. And we decided for the first time in 2014 to bottle a single vineyard, Collevota. The first vintage, I realized that this vineyard gave this such a unique result was in 2012. But we didn't bottle this vineyard as a single vineyard. 2013 again, but twice is not enough to release a single vineyard. I needed and I need a more constant result. And we finally did in 2014. The next vintage, this is the official news, will be the 2018. We will release next year, 2021.
So you don't declassify Collevota and put it into the Montepulciano at all, correct?
No, because the Collevota is a completely different wine, doesn't fit the Montepulciano. And the point of Collevota is not the best Montepulciano I can do, because some vintages, I bottle the Collevota, any vintage, I don't release, because I want to study the wine. But this wine is very good, even in the 15 and 16 especially, but it's not Collevota. It's not what Collevota is supposed to be. So it's not about how good, how great the wine is. Collevota is the identity, the recognizability of this wine. I want to taste, to feel the traditional elements of this wine and that vineyard. But it's so different, I cannot blend. And this was another important things to learn for me, because you cannot blend two great wines. The result is not the greatness, because we need the complementary aspect able to fit each other. So blending is something very specific, requires wines able to talk to each other. So yeah, but I don't blend. That's the answer.
So you taste them. So obviously not between 14 and 18, because you feel like it didn't hit its stride, I guess you could say. But do you constantly taste the releases of Collevota with the non-releases of Collevota and see the progression of them, I guess?
Yeah, I cannot taste the released Collevota as often as I would like, because of the bottles and the production is so small.
Yes.
Even with the caravan, it's very tough, but I try, I do my best. And I tasted the not released Collevota for sure. Yeah. Making wine is a never ending experience of learning. And especially now with this climate change, things in any vintage, I think things are different. We need to follow the vintage, not the previous experience. The previous experience is a fact, is important, but it's not something we can pick the inspiration for the new one. We need to stay focused on the present because things are changing very fast with this climate change. So any vintage is different, and for me it's important to taste the different vintages, even not released, to taste the meaning of the climate, how the soil react, and the impact of the soil on the different vintages. So yes.
Wonderful. Nick, I think you had a question about that actually, the single vineyard releases.
Yeah, when I was invited to sort of attend this session, I like dived deep into Pecorino, and through sort of reading Ian Daggett books about Pecorino, he mentions that you're one of the top 3 producers of Pecorino in Italy. Do you have any plans to sort of create a more sort of single vineyard style like you've done with Montepulciano and Trebbiano for the Pecorino that you make?
Yes, yes, I have some plans. I'm laughing because please don't be scared about my answer. I don't want to push. No, yeah, I have this plan because over the vintages, I had a chance to understand that I have 8 different biotypes in my Pecorino vineyard. 3.8 hectares is the total extension of the vineyard, but a part of the vineyard performs in a different way, in a more interesting way. For me, is better than the others. And so it's not because I planned, but I found different identity, a different meaning in a part of the vineyard that deserve to be bottled as a single vineyard Pecorino. We are a small winery. We cannot produce so many wines. So before to take a decision like this, we need to consider very carefully many aspects. But we are very close to produce a single vineyard Pecorino, not because it's something we planned logically, but because there is a special value in this vineyard that I would like to express.
Cristiana, you talked about biotypes. Can you maybe talk, how do you study different biotypes? I know in terms of Pecorino, you started with just the 5 vines on your property and you found them, which is a very amazing story. I'm not sure if we have time for that story today, but just speaking about biotypes and just the different biotypes of, say, something like Pecorino, how do you separate those and study those?
You know, biotypes is something not easy to distinguish at the beginning because you cannot make any, analysis are not the most suitable way to start. So we need to observe, and a different biotypes has a different shape of the cluster, different leaves, and usually has a different harvest time and a different acidity, different sugar content, and different flavors, different texture. So distinguish biotypes. Biotype requires a lot of work in the vineyard. Observation is the first step, And then the taste, you can make even analysis to check, pH, acidity, generic parameters, but the focus, the real core is not the analysis, but is the taste and the behavior of this grape. In this vineyard of Pecorino, 3.8 hectares, we have a little slope. So from the bottom to the top, for sure, the exposure is different. So the fruit has a different behavior. Over the years, this distinguishable condition changes the behavior of the vine, not just the behavior of the fruit. It's a behavior of the vine. So the roots is something related to the genetic aspect. And so we, over the years, we catalogized these biotypes, and we harvest just in one pass. In one vintage, we harvested different biotypes in different steps, but harvesting all together, we discovered increase and save the complexity of the wine, because the population of indigenous East is wider, having different biotypes. There is more complexity in the flavors, in the texture, even the length of the wine is better, and even the ageability, because of the balance, add something to the balance, this complexity. But for sure it's something very tough to distinguish, but makes the difference between a good wine and a great wine.
Okay, and you mentioned, this kind of ties in a way, I suppose. You mentioned multiple Ciano not being able to ripen prior, hence the founding of kind of where Ceresula came from. But now that climate change is really accelerated in a lot of different wine growing regions, how have you seen that affect Abruzzo, and does that affect the biotypes as well and the changing of them?
Yeah, climate change is a fact. We can see any vintage, the harvest time is an early harvest time, so it's an advance. The real problem about climate change doesn't stay in the hot season like summer, but mainly stay in the winter, because the real problem is, if someone asks me, you have the power to change a season, choose the season you want to affect is the winter, because the main problem of the climate change stays in the winter. The winter is warm, there is no winter, and it's dry. So that's the real problem. And how we afford this climate change? We struggle in a different way. Any vintage is different. We are lucky because in our area, we have a resource of water in the subsoil. So the fruit is never shriveled, even in a dry, super hot vintages. But for sure, the warm temperatures we cannot control, even because warm winters very often mean frost in spring. So we don't make any green pruning. We don't debud. Because we, until end of May, because of the frost, because of the risk of the frost. In this area, we are lucky because we have a constant breeze, light breeze, able to move the air, and so it's a natural protection for the frost. But you know, the balance is very fragile. So no green pruning, but the main answer we can have stays in the native grapes, because these native grapes are more suitable to rebalance themselves according to the vintage and react in a better way, considering a hot, warm season or super rainy season, because we are facing different opposite climatic conditions. We don't feed the soil, we don't use the irrigation just because we want to train our vines to react in a proper way to different condition of the climate and these, you know. The altitude for us is an help because saves the length of the growing season, and so the length of the growing season means balance, capability of aging, but we are worried for sure.
You speak of climate change. It's snowing here today. So poor vigneron for Prince Edward County, where I am now, and in Niagara, frost has definitely been a worry this week as well.
Of course.
But Brie, you being on Fogo, do you find that that's really brought you closer to things like climate change and nature? Obviously, it's pretty stunning there, but you're surrounded by, you know, you're on a small island with a lot of locals who I'm sure talk about climate change quite a bit.
For sure, I think it's felt at Fogo maybe more acutely because there is such a tie to the natural environment, to the sea, to fishing. If anything, it's a reminder that we're a global ship, and things that are felt in Abruzzo are felt, you know, elsewhere as well. Yeah.
Absolutely, because you guys talk about, was it 12 or 13 seasons that you guys talk about on?
Yeah, that's right. We have a few extra seasons. Berry season is my favorite. That's the kind of the end of September when we get, I think, a dozen or so different berries that come up. Yeah.
Crazy. So obviously the opportunity for pairings and wines and things like that must be pretty incredible.
Yeah. Actually, as we were chatting about Charsuolo, it reminded me of one of my all-time favorite pairings, and guest reaction validated that, was mousse tartare with partridge berries and Charsuolo d'Abruzzo. Was phenomenal.
Oh, wow.
Sign me up. So Cristiana, I know we're running a little bit low on time here, but one thing I want to talk about as well is obviously, you know, people who have been around and growing grapes and fruit in Abruzzo, I'm sure have taken notice of not only your success, but your knowledge and your studying of varietals and native varietals to Abruzzo. How does that, do you find that there's a lot of conversation? Are you guys close? Are you close with your neighbors, and are you helping them really adapt their native varietals to soil types as well?
Yeah. There is another grower in Cugnoli, for example. It's a very talented guy. He farms organically 4 hectares of vineyard, super artisanal, small, but focus in native grapes as well. I'm trying to support him, not overpowering his identity. Of course, it's very important. It's very important for me to respect any one idea. And but in Abruzzo we have a beautiful patrimony of wineries and winemakers, the historical ones for sure, but young one, Francesco Cirelli, the very talented guy located in Teramo area. Terraviva is another great estate. Caterina Cornacchia, she's I don't know what generation of historical winery, but she's bringing fresh energy, new approach. She's farming organically, so is another interesting winery. We have Presidium in Valle Peligna, another super talented guy, second generation, and we talk. We share impressions, difficulties, and Francesco Paolo Valentini, of course, and you know, it's important. It's important sharing experiences, knowledge. I'm taking care of my area as much as possible, not just in terms of wine growers, but in terms of farmers, because I'm pushing farmers working with other crops like wheat, sunflowers, olive trees, to farm organically, to saving the biodiversity, to keep our environment healthy, clean. So there is a deep connection, not between wine growers, but in terms of farmers. I'm very focused in vineyards. Is my way of life, so I really don't have extra time to dedicate time to other crops, and so I'm supporting other growers to keep going with their own crops, but farming in a proper way, because the biodiversity is a richness we have, and I want to support this richness as much as possible. You know, wine for me is not a little segment. I understand how complex, how infinity is the wine world, and I consider all the aspects affecting the wine. So it's not about training system, it's not about yeast, but it's about sunlight, it's about soil profile, it's about how the soil microbes impact on the grapevine life and longevity. It's about minerals, it's about geology, it's about moon phases. It's a very complex infinity world. And for me, the challenge was since the beginning. That's the reason why I decided to study chemistry and not enology, because for me, wine is something more than just the wine making process. I was interested in understanding, in learning about how all these aspects can affect the wine, the final result. And so, yeah, the involvement.
Will you be taking all of that kind of like self-learned education and applying that to help people maybe outside of Abruzzo? Would you be consulting for people looking to grow things like Montepulciano or Pecorino?
Yeah, honestly, someone started asking me a few years ago. I'm totally focused on my work, of course. But what I'm considering is that can be important for me to understand even the behavior of these native grapes in different climatic areas, in different soil profiles. Probably this experience will bring me more knowledge. And so I don't exclude for the future this kind of involvement, because what is important for me is, of course, the native grape, the specific grape variety, but even how this grape variety changes in relation of different sites profile, because this connection is the final result of the wine. So it's not just about native grape, you know how important they are for me, but the terroir sometimes overpower even the meaning of the native grape. And it's my experience with the Collevota, because Collevota is mainly terroir more than Montepulciano grape, and Fontecanale is another magic balance of unpredictable elements able to join each other. You know, my studies in chemistry helped me in developing a very sharp mind. So to understand the behavior of the environment, but I always know that wine is something unpredictable. We cannot choose the direction. We just we struggle to understand what can be the most suitable behavior we can have for our grapevine and our wine.
Wonderful. We've had a couple questions about where Kwamari might be. I feel like I should address this at this point. We got to see him yesterday. We got to see him a couple days ago in a test. I'm sure he's probably outside right now, hanging out, or inside sleeping.
Yeah, but, of course. I think he's outside of my door because it's dinner time.
It's so funny. Well, we'll start wrapping it up because I know that everyone has things to do. Maybe one or two quick questions before we go. You're all pretty well known for your incredible palates. Cristiana, we see you tasting some pretty incredible wines all the time. You're probably one of the best blind tasters I've ever met anyways. I'd like to go through each one of you and kind of ask about what, quick advice you guys might have for young somms, both for tasting, but also just for building programs that might be specific to, the restaurants or the markets that they're running. So Cristiana, maybe tasting, palates, how do you practice you don't run a restaurant obviously, but how do you hone your palate?
Yeah, I had the lucky condition to grow up in a family with a wine culture. So I started drinking wine when I was very young, and very good, great wines. Oh, sorry.
What are you drinking now?
Have a problem. Now I'm drinking my Montepulciano 2017. What I understood over the years is that it's important to taste with the palate, of course, but even with your mind. So for me, what is important is to find the connection about the flavors, element of the wine, and the place where this wine comes from. So the fascinating element is when I drink, I don't know, for example, the differences between Grand Cru Chablis, walking in the rue of Grand Cru Chablis to see how Blanchot, the white soil, and I love to find this aspect in the wine, or Grenouille at the bottom of the hill with more broad characteristic in the wine. So it's important when we taste wine to stay focused on what we are drinking, not just to enjoy the wine, but to be precise in the tasting. And in making a wine list, even for a grape variety, for me, would be nice to express diversity of the same grape variety coming from different terroirs. For example, Riesling from Mosel is different from Riesling from Alsace, and the Sangiovese, Chianti Classico, Chianti Rufina, or Chianti Classico. Chianti Classico from Panzano is different from Radda. So when I taste, it's not about Sangiovese, but it's about the sense of the place, the characteristic of that soil. Of course, it's important to practice, to drink wine, but not just drink to enjoy, have fun. There is a pleasant part of my work, I admit, but when I taste, for me, it's a learning experience. It's not just pleasant experience.
Yeah. And Brie, how about you? Obviously, you run this pretty specific international program. I never released an international hotel or a destination, really. How do you find that, running, do you have any advice for people looking to branch out or run programs that are very specific, niche like that?
For sure. I think we're really fortunate this time that we're in. The world of wine has never been better and more interesting, and there's lots to choose from. For me, what drives my decision making, I would say is value driven, looking for producers that are good people. They're preserving culture through native grapes or tradition, and they have a sense of place about what they're doing.
And Nick, you have one of the most dynamic lists in the city, good sir. I spend a lot of my time there. What's you know, you have a lot of people come to you and asking to work for you and things like that and learn from you. What's some advice that you can give to some folks about running a program like yours in Toronto, for example, at a small restaurant?
Yeah, from like, you really just gotta like, wine is such a honest sort of sensation we have. So when you have something in the glass, if you like it, like, or something interests you, or you like what you're drinking, it's very easy to get caught up in what other people think about it. And for me, wine has always been something that I reacted to from like, you know, my instincts and my gut. And, you know, when I started Peter Pan, or started at Peter Pan, did I think that I wanted to, you know, fall in love with Italy or Austria as much as I did? No, but my sort of tasting wine sort of led me down that road. And I didn't at once feel intimidated by what other people did or what other somms that I respected cared for and not cared for. You really have to like just trust your own palate and trust what excites you, because that's how you communicate that to guests. If you're just talking about, you know, intellectual, you know, wines that you don't really necessarily are passionate about, guests understand that really quickly. But the minute you start talking about, you know, something that excites you, it influences your guests really quickly, and they love to get caught up in the emotion of it. So, you know, it's very easy to get intimidated and influenced by people around you, but just, you know, follow your instincts, follow what you love, and you really can't go wrong.
Absolutely. Thank you. Well, Cristiana, I think everyone loves your wines. They're everywhere in Toronto. I know Nick is drinking some Fonte Canale that I believe is on the list there at current. I think they have Colavota actually as well. I'm drinking Pecorino, which will be in the market shortly. This is the last vintage. But for the folks who are watching or listening, the 2017 Multiple Ciano will be available in the LCBO starting this weekend, which is pretty amazing. Cristiana, I know, is supposed to be visiting us in the market right now. I was supposed to be there right today, visiting her brother, which is a bit of a bummer. Or sorry, next weekend is the long weekend is when the release is. But yeah, the Pecorino's coming in stock, as well as the Terrasulo and the Trebbiano, I think all at the end of the month. So look for those new vintages. You can head to halpernwine.com to check those out and look at their availability. Thank you guys. Thank you guys so much for joining us. I do have one little tidbit I have to run through. Anyone who joined us a couple weeks ago when we had Chef Daniel Boulud on with Group Artemis and all their winemakers knew that we held a little bit of a raffle to support Daniel Boulud's Hand in Hand charity, where they were giving away, Group Artemis was kind enough to donate anyways, Jeroboams of wine, as well as dinner at Restaurant Boulud. So I'm just gonna read those names quick because we told people we would announce them at 2 o'clock. So we're running a few minutes behind here. But Oliver Bach, you win the Chateau Latour 2005 Jeroboam. Howard Green, the Clos de Tar 1996 Jeroboam. Barry Rubin, the Domaine du Genie 2012 Clos Gougeot. Jeroboam goes to you. Mr. Gilmore, I don't see a first name here, to see M. You're the recipient of the Isley Vineyards 2013 Cab and Double Mag. And George Grossman, you are the lucky man who will be dining at the Skybox in NYC with Daniel at a date of your choosing, I believe in 2021. Halpern is donating the wine for the dinner, which is pretty wonderful as well. So to wrap it up again, thank you guys. The next weekend we're taking off because it's a long weekend here in Ontario, so we didn't want to expect people to jump on. The following weekend, the 23rd, I believe, we're hosting Gonzalo, who's the winemaker at Vega Sicilia. And then the weekend after that, we're hosting the folks from Soldera before we wrap everything up for the summer likely. So thanks so much for joining us, everybody. Thank you, Cristiana, so much. We hope to see you soon.
Thank you.
Brie, we hope you get back to Fogo shortly as well. Nick, I'll see
Come
you
visit.
probably whenever I can see you. Oh, and Nick, just one last thing. You are now running a takeout program, correct, at Peter Pan?
Yeah, Tuesday. So everyone here is the first people to know. I haven't announced it yet, but it's going to be exciting to come and drink all my wine because God knows it hasn't moved anywhere in 2 months.
I'm going to try and convince you to sell me all the Colabota.
Oh,
Awesome, guys. Thank you so much. Stay safe.
Thank
Stay healthy.
you.
Bye.
Talk to everyone
Thank
soon.
you. Miss you guys.
Miss you too.
Bye.
Bye.